Good evening and welcome to Chasing the Facts. I'm your host, Sam Chase, and with us this evening is Chelmsford School Superintendent, Dr. Jay Lang.
Good evening, how are you?
Good evening, Jay. Oh, I'm fine. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Good, and we're very happy to have you here.
Well, thank you. Happy to be here.
And it's very timely. The reason I've asked Jay to be with us this evening is obviously we're taping on September 15th, so school has already started, has just started. And we'd like to talk a little bit about that. But before we get into the discussion, Jay, if you could just give us a very brief summary of your background and your credentials, and then we'll get into the discussion.
Sure. I actually was mentioning I have now been the superintendent here in Chelmsford for 6 years. I'm just starting my 7th year. Prior to coming to Chelmsford as a superintendent, I had worked in Lowell, neighboring city, for about 20 years. So this is my second school system that I've worked in. I was the deputy superintendent for finance and operations in Lowell. Very much enjoyed that job. Reside in Lowell. My wife and 3 kids were raised in Lowell, so we're not too far away. My boys are all in college now, so that changed since the last time I was here. My twins are seniors at Merrimack this year, so they'll be wrapping up. And then my youngest just went off to Stonehill. So I've got three in college. So I went through the whole kind of COVID college experience with our parents over the last year and a half. No, again, just very much like it. And like I said, just starting year 7 here in Chelmsford as a superintendent. It's been a good move for me. I very much enjoyed my time here. Very nice community, very good supports. I'm sure we'll get into a little bit later on tonight, but really enjoy it.
Well, that's great, and I think we're a community, anyone who's followed the situation as far as the school administration is concerned, and remember the circumstances under which you arrived, I think most of us understand that we're lucky to have gotten you, especially given your concentration in financial administration. I mean, obviously you have a terrific background in curriculum and educational things too, but I think the thing that certainly caught my interest when your name came up was the fact that you had actual practical experience in managing the school financial operations, and that is what we needed at the time. And I can't ever remember a time when we've been this financially sound in the school system in Chelmsford with regard to funding of the programs and bringing things on board that need to be brought on to address curriculum initiatives and so forth. So we're very, very happy, and it doesn't seem like it's been that long. So, and let's hope you have another however many years you would like to have with us.
I've got many to go before I retire, so hopefully they'll be here in Chelmsford.
That's great to hear. I'd like to have you just briefly touch upon the differences between being on the school board or school committee and being in the school administration, because I know I talk to people in the public and they don't, a lot of folks don't really understand the administrative versus the policy and that kind of thing. So if you could just briefly tell us what your vision of the role of a school committee is and the vision of a school superintendent and the superintendent's staff.
Sure. We were mentioning earlier, I'm actually blessed. We've had very good school committees here in Chelmsford to be working with. School committees typically in all cities and towns in the state of Massachusetts are elected among the residents. In Chelmsford, we have 5 residents that serve on our school committee. You know, I think this is a misnomer. They don't receive money or any kind of salary or benefits for being on the school committee. They're really volunteers that put a lot of time in and a lot even behind the scenes, preparing and getting ready for meetings and talking about different educational topics. We have 3 of our 5 members are educators and teachers or administrators or previously administrators, and we have other members who have students in the system right now. So we really have a very good mix of individuals on our school committee, and they really help set the kind of the visioning for the district. They're very involved with the approval of the budget. I, as a superintendent, oversee the day-to-day operations of the district. I'm kind of the full-time employee with all of our different staff in the schools. And I report and make recommendations to the school committee around, say, budget and expenditures. The school committee would develop policy for the district, and then once they set a policy, it then becomes my job to enact that policy and put it into operation. And really the third key role, you've got budget, you've got policy, and the third is really hiring the superintendent. So once the school committee does hire the superintendent, I'm then responsible for hiring the staff that work directly with me, and our principals hiring the teachers and paraprofessionals and support staff in the schools to oversee the day-to-day programs. So at the point where I'm hired, or anyone in the superintendent role, we really assume kind of the day-to-day operations of the district. So if staff or faculty or parents or students in the district have any questions or concerns, they would usually come up through the school to central office, and we would work with them on them. And I would keep the school committee apprised of different situations that are taking place, or, like I said, policy recommendations or budget recommendations. But they're really more of a voluntary, and it's good that we have them, but they're a voluntary board. They're not in the schools every day like some of our staff are. They're just giving a lot of hours, kind of donating to the town, right, to help oversee and set some of our programming.
So the comparison I draw when I try to explain this to people, I mean, you've just given a wonderful explanation, and you've explained the roles very well. But I tell people a school committee, like a select board, functions more as a board of directors. They don't actually run the operation, but they provide the guidelines and, as you said, the policy directives and so forth, whereas the superintendent would be the equivalent of a chief executive officer and actually running the operation. So
correct. No, that's a good analogy.
So that's the only other thing I think the school committee does do that is, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is right. They actually are involved in the contract negotiations with the staff.
They're very involved with collective bargaining.
Collective bargaining, right.
And negotiating all of our different contracts. That's the role of the school.
So it's a very, very important role, and as somebody who has served in several capacities in town government, I can tell you that, and I've never been a school committee person, but I can tell you that, in my opinion, that probably is the hardest working of all the boards in town. Now, I'll get complaints from select board members and planning board members now, I'm sure, but that's just how I see it.
They put a lot of time in. I think a lot of times people don't see behind the scenes.
Exactly.
They really do a lot of work.
I think so. So, well, that's a very good summary of the differences between administrative and policy making. One thing that interests me, and I know is of interest to the audience, is the fact that we just went through, I would say, an unprecedented time with this COVID pandemic and the remote learning situation that we had. And what we did in Chelmsford, you opted to adopt what is, for lack of a better term, I guess, a hybrid model. Could you explain to the audience how that evolved, and just give us kind of your opinion on how it went through the year, any things that you learned, any predictors for the future in case we have to go through anything like this again?
Sure. So for those watching at home, we actually, I'll talk a little bit about last year, the 2021 school year, and then a little bit some of the changes we made for the current school year going in. But as the pandemic hit in March of 20, schools shut down in very short order. It was Friday the 13th of March. I'll never forget that.
I had forgotten that.
Yep, that we sent our staff and students home that Friday afternoon, and at that point in time, we thought that they might just be out for a couple of days or a couple of weeks until we tried to get a handle on what was happening.
I think flatten the curve was a phrase that was being used.
I don't even know if we started that yet. That did come out at one point in time, but we were just trying to kind of get a sense for exactly what was happening. And the weeks quickly became months, and at some point during probably April or May, we realized we weren't going to be going back to school. So one of the things that we asked our teachers to do immediately was just to maintain contact with their students. We weren't set up to go remote, and really no district in the Commonwealth was ready for the remote change that we had to take. But fortunately, we did have the technology. We were able to work with the staff to support them, keep the connections with the students going, keep some good activity with the students, and that worked through the end of that school year. And I think we all kind of hoped that or 2 summers ago, we'd be preparing for the 2021 school year and things would be a little bit different, and it really just didn't turn out that way. COVID kept, kind of on an incline. It became apparent pretty quickly that we were going to have to put some programs in place for long term, not just a couple of weeks, but potentially months or a school year, of having periods where maybe it would be okay and the COVID numbers within the community would allow for in-person instruction. There might be other times when we had to go fully remote. You know, we had to come up with all different options to implement. But we had to, as much as we kept education at the forefront, we had to now maintain, and we still do, health and safety conditions in the schools. So we had masking, we had minimal distances within students and desks and classrooms. And when we looked at putting our program together, we realized that even if we wanted students to come back, we didn't physically have the space to have everyone come back at the same time. So we kind of adopted a hybrid model in Chelmsford. So we had students come to school in person 2 days a week. So depending on the cohort that they were in, they came to school 2 days a week. Everyone in the district learned remotely on Wednesday, and that was actually, I think, good for us because it provided that kind of training and experience that if as a district we ever had to go fully remote, all the staff and all the students would have been used to doing that if they had to. And then Thursday, Friday, obviously, were in-person days. So half the students would be at home learning, and we had live instruction taking place. So the teacher would be in the classroom with half of the kids, and the other half of the kids would be at home watching and interacting with the classroom. That was really challenging for staff, for students, and parents, because parents now became teachers. So parents and grandparents and anyone who was taking care of kids really became educators that year. So that was a challenge for us. I think as a district, we really did a good job, given the circumstances. We were able to maintain that contact. It was a very trying year for everyone, but we really outperformed a lot of the other districts in the state and even in the our Merrimack Valley as far as providing a good quality program, good number of instructional hours each day. We were able to integrate in some of the specials and some kind of recreational time during the day, but it was as close to a traditional school day as we could get given the circumstances. And then as last spring, we came into like the February, March, April timeframe. We were at the point where we really had a pretty good handle on COVID at that time, and our cases were being pretty well managed. We had all types of different initiatives in place, COVID pool testing. We had different options to be able to track COVID spread, and fortunately we didn't see COVID spread in the schools last year. Even if we had a case, it was usually a familial case, so someone in the home, mother or father, may have had COVID. Then when the rest of the family tested, say they would test positive. But because of the face masks and the distancing and the hand washing and all the different practices we put in place, we really didn't see spread at all last year within the schools. It was really isolated cases. So we started as the spring came to actually bring back more students to in-person. And I forget if it was right before or after April school vacation week, we had our elementary school students all come back to full-time, 5-day-a-week instruction. We lengthened the school day from half days to full days. We had all different steps that we took to try to get back to a more traditional school year. And by May and June, we did have everyone who wanted to come back in person be allowed to come back into the schools.
About what percentage was that?
80-20.
Oh, that's
so we had
good.
about 80% of the students wanted to be in person, and about 20% still wanted to be remote. And last year, the Department of Ed required you to have a remote option, so our families and students had the ability to just be remote fully if they wanted to. I think as we shift to this year, so that was changed. So the Department of Ed came out and said, your instruction needs to be 5 days a week, full days, in person this school year. There's no remote option. So over the course of this summer, we had to work with a lot of our families and staff to just prepare, because now we were going to have 100% of all students back in the buildings. We had to modify some of our practices within the schools because we had to fit everyone back into the buildings. That was a change for us. I know and if you think about it, even on the first day of school, the assistant superintendent and I were going around to the elementary schools to just check on how it was going operationally. And it was interesting because usually you'd see the kindergarten students going for tours around the buildings, but you actually had kindergarten and first grade students going around because some of them hadn't been in the school all of last year. So it certainly, those little changes had to be kind of taken into consideration. But for this year, we have everyone back in person. All of our staff, all of our students, 5 days a week, full in-person instruction, as normal as we possibly can be. The only kind of mitigation or special mitigation factor we have in place now is we are all masked. So regardless of vaccination status, all staff and students, when they're in our public school buildings, do wear masks. That's something that we have to do. Obviously, the hygiene's important to us, so we do take mask breaks during the day. Students wash their hands frequently. We have hand sanitizer available if you can't get to a sink. We're really trying to make the schools as safe as possible so that we don't have any type of COVID spread or the need to close a school, because we really want to keep in-person learning going for the school year as long as we possibly can.
So I would say that's an excellent summary. As somebody, and I experienced a little bit of what you were talking about as a grandparent with 2 children in the elementary system. And we had some daycare responsibility as a result, so we had to participate in that. And I was just absolutely amazed at what I considered to be the flexibility of your teaching staff. Because, as you know, I'm married to an ex-Chelmsford teacher,
Right.
39 years in the elementary school. And thank heaven for that, because that did come in handy,
Right.
you know,
Right.
when we had to go through that situation. But especially when you consider what was going on in some of the other districts, it didn't seem to me that you had a lot of difficulty getting the teaching staff to be as flexible as they had to be, whereas in other communities we read and hear in the media where they had horrible problems, they had union issues, they had all kinds of things come up that were preventing them from moving in the direction that they had to move in to provide the educational product. But we didn't seem to have any of that in Chelmsford. And of course people think, oh, well, so what? Well, I say, when you're doing the right thing, nobody says anything, so
Right.
you don't know. But put that in the context of many of the communities around us where they had those problems. I just think it's astounding. I think it's astounding the job you and your administrative staff did, and I am doubly astounded at how flexible the teachers were and how well they executed on that remote hybrid model. It's just amazing.
Yeah, it was, it was challenging. They were very flexible. I think everyone was working together. I think we all realized that, these are unusual circumstances. I forget the word you used, but this is unprecedented.
That's right,
In
exactly.
the time that we were in. And I think everyone just said, listen, we're going to do the very best we possibly can for the kids, which, is telling. And I think that's what's kind of special about this community. But everyone did step forward. It was difficult. It was probably the most difficult year I can say for my career,
right.
And I'm certain of every teacher and support staff member that we have in the district. But people did come together to make it work, and we didn't have some of the issues that other districts had. Doesn't mean it was easier, but it was just in the end an incredible effort. And I think that really has set us up well for this school year. And this is still going to be a challenging school year for us because this still isn't a completely normal school year. But I will tell you, we're in the 3rd week of school now, and I can't believe that.
Oh, that's
but
amazing.
We're already into the 3rd week of school, and just to see the teachers and the kids just being so happy to be back, with their classmates and teachers now, with their colleagues, and can actually plan and support, and that camaraderie that you get among staff. It's been great to see these first few weeks of school. So we're really hoping that continues over the course of the year.
And I guess I never thought in my wildest imagination I would ever hear school children say, I can't wait to get back to school.
Yeah. No,
and that's been partly the result of this whole situation. My oldest granddaughter is starting 3rd grade this year, and she just could not wait to get back to school, and she is just so happy. And then Violet started. She was one of the ones. They both go to Byam. Violet was one that wasn't in the school for her kindergarten year, so she was one of the ones that were probably taking the extra tour with the kids.
Right.
It's just made a world of difference. So going forward, and now you said something that I guess I was not aware of. I did know that the governor said that he wants everybody back in the schools and he doesn't want the remote learning, but
correct.
Is that something that just isn't possible at this time if somebody feels that they can't attend the school? So there is, what I understood you to say is there is no remote learning. Is that?
There's no remote learning option in Chelmsford.
Okay.
So the state does have 2 virtual schools. They're almost like, if you want to think about it like as a separate district, it's like a virtual
okay.
school
All
district.
right.
So they have had these options that have quite expanded. It's online remote learning, you know, almost like similar to what we'd have last year with a teacher online and a classroom of students. But you almost want to think of it as, say, like a charter school type concept.
I was just
where
thinking that.
Yeah, it's not really a charter school because it is a Commonwealth school, but you might have some students from Chelmsford or Billerica or Tingsboro or anywhere in the state apply to that school. So you might be in a classroom with children from all these different communities. So the state does have the 2 virtual school options.
Okay, that's good to know.
So parents can apply and work into the virtual school. They just have said all of our different localities, so all of our cities and towns need to have the regular traditional program that we would offer. And their way of kind of doing that is they provide for what type of instruction is kind of credible time that goes towards learning, or time on learning they call it. And they're really only counting for us the amount of time on learning when students are in person.
Okay.
So that's how we have to kind of basically, or why we have to have the full in-person days. But if we do, and I'm sure we have had a few parents, I won't fully know until October 1st, when the October 1st census comes out, may have enrolled in, say, the virtual school, if they knew they just wanted to do that. And the luxury is for the parent is they could enroll for the year if they were uncertain or concerned about school and having their child attend in person. And then if they're more comfortable, let's say a vaccine comes out and whatever the COVID numbers become a little bit more manageable, they can always re-enroll in Chelmsford. So you don't, it's not that you can't come back to the town. You can always come back to the town that you reside in.
Is that my understanding is that that's the way it works for the charter option as well. If you elect to do a year in the charter school and you decide that that may not be the right choice for your child,
you can always come back to your home district.
Yes, okay,
Right.
That's good.
Right.
Well, I'm glad the state has, and I think that's the right decision. I mean, obviously, we're better off with the in-person learning, but you know, not one size does not fit all. So I'm glad the state has made that option.
It was very challenging for us as a district to operate last year with, you know, some students in person, some students remote. And again, remember I mentioned there was that 80-20. So we had about 20% of the students who were fully remote the whole year. So we were able to actually match up, in a lot of cases, those students who wanted to be fully remote with maybe some staff members that had to be fully remote for different reasons as well.
Okay, that's good.
So you might have had a fully remote class taking place that didn't really impact the regular school day schedule.
But the fact that you had 20% that were on fully remote, actually, I'm sure, made it a little easier to offer the in-person learning because you had fewer students, you know, in terms of
in the
social doing the social distancing and so forth. So you actually had fewer people to.
Right, but we wouldn't really have the bandwidth or the capacity right now to be operating a remote program in Chelmsford and a fully in-person program. And I think that's the problem that most districts would experience. Even, let's say, we wouldn't have 20% now, but let's say we even had 5% of the population that wanted to stay fully remote. We wouldn't have the staff or the supports to be able to run that particular program and our full district.
Right.
Same would happen with the Drake or Billerica or whatnot.
Right.
So that's why the state pushes that those two technical schools if families want it.
I think that's a good solution. We have about 6 minutes left in the show. It goes quickly.
It goes very quick.
And I wanted to ask you a question about curriculum and what drives the curriculum design changes in the public school. And you know, this is a hot political topic now as far as certain things people expect to see taught in the schools or they don't want taught in the schools and so forth. And I think I've heard from members of the community that are concerned about various curriculum initiatives being quote-unquote forced on their children. So the question I have of you is how do we make, as a school district, how do we make the decisions and where does the source of the curriculum come from? If you can answer that in about 5 minutes, that would be great.
Well, that's quite the question you left for me in the end. We don't actually make curriculum decisions at a local level. So in the state of Massachusetts, the Department of Education has what they call curriculum frameworks. So for each grade level and for each subject, they actually have you know, what is to be taught and instructed at the different grade levels. As a local level, we get to pick, say, products that you'd buy that might meet that particular need. So about a year or so ago, or maybe actually 2 years ago at this point, we had decided that we needed a new literacy curriculum for the elementary grade level. So the state has the frameworks that talk about what the different scope and sequencing and type of subjects you need to cover, because that obviously aligns with the assessment system, MCAS and whatnot.
Right.
But we as a district get to pick which program we think would be best for us. So we went through a very long process. We knew we needed a new literacy program at the elementary level. You would have multiple vendors come in that have a product that is aligned to the state curriculum frameworks. You would evaluate that, and you would make a decision about what would be best in your community. So in the end, we ended up, again, not just us, but we'd have some central office administrators, say our reading coordinator, teachers at the different grade levels who would actually be teaching the subject matter. They would weigh in, they would sample the different products, and then as a district, we would make a decision about which product to go with. And we ended up selecting Fontes and Pinnell Classroom, so that was the new literacy program we rolled out at the elementary level. When we do that, we kind of have a curriculum cycle. So every, say, 3 to 5 years, we might take a look at a curriculum that's in place. Is it working well? Do we need to make tweaks to it? Are there different materials that are now new and relevant that we might need to add? That happens pretty regularly, but we don't, and I know that this is nationally kind of an issue around different agendas that might be being pushed by different groups. We don't actually determine kind of those frameworks. We select the product that will be used.
Right.
But the state has actually kind of laid out the curriculum frameworks and what will be taught and what will be age appropriate at the different grade levels and different disciplines within the state.
That to me, that's a very comforting answer, and I think that should also sit well with, I think, the majority of the audience. And really, what you've described is a situation that it sounds like to me, like in Massachusetts, it would almost be impossible for a school district to respond to a political push or an initiative to adopt a certain curriculum, because what you've just outlined is a framework and a very well-defined process that includes a vetting process that has to take place over a considerable period of time before the actual curriculum gets introduced in the classroom. So it wouldn't be possible for somebody to say, okay, let's do this, and then 6 months later it's being taught. That really can't happen in the scenario you've described.
The whole process really isn't open to kind of like those political whim type things, because at the state level you've got curriculum experts and content experts looking to see what should be taught basically at the different grade levels in the schools.
And it has to also correct me if I'm wrong, but we have to also keep in mind that a sudden change or sudden changes probably couldn't occur just on the basis of the, as you say, the frameworks and the fact that we have to meet the goals of the MCAS testing. So you've got those standards are in place.
Correct.
And whatever you do curriculum-wise has to support those standards, and that can't change unless the standards change. Is that a fair statement to make?
Yeah, because you wouldn't be assessing what's actually
exactly,
being instructed.
Exactly.
Correct. Yeah, no, it's a long process, because even if you were going to add, like at the middle school level, there was a lot of discussion about adding, like, say, civics to the middle school curriculum, and actually trying some kind of a project, a civics project to the middle school work. But I know there was a team of history and social studies teachers that worked on that for probably 1.5 years to 2 years with the Department of Education to put together what they'd like it to look at. It has to be vetted, it has to be approved by the Board of Education. It then kind of comes down to the districts. We would have to take a look at it and see if our curriculum meets the standard, and if it's aligned. If it's not, we may have to make an adjustment. But there's nothing that's going to come up in now, and then we're going to be expected to implement it in December. It would be a multi-year process and a review process to do something like that.
Yeah, and I think that, again, that's very comforting for people to hear. And we should all be very secure in the knowledge that any of these decisions at the curriculum level or even at the administrative level are not taken lightly. So we're almost out of time, Jay, and I'm just going to leave you with one thought. I know that you participate in the Arts Technology Education Fund.
I do.
And my wife has just been appointed.
I heard.
So you will be seeing her at your meetings, and she is very, very excited to be on that committee and to do the work, and I think she is uniquely qualified for that, having taught for 39 years in the Chelmsford school system. So thank you for being our guest, and we will have you on again during the year as situations come up.
Thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Well, you're very welcome.